Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri and this is another Tada Genji tradition video. In this video, we're actually going to begin discussing the teachings from the Great Star category. However, this video is an introduction to that because before we begin discussing the Great Star category's calculations and equations, we have to address a very critical issue, and that is, do you measure off of a consistent and a self-contained system of measurement, or do you measure off of a relative and a dependent system of measurement? Now, you may be asking, what does that mean? So let me try to give you an example. Let me see if I can make this clear. Your clock, a watch, a wristwatch, a clock, it measures time by ticking away seconds. And those seconds are, for lack of a better word, predetermined in length. They're self-contained and they're independent. The ticking away of the seconds is unrelated to anything going on in the sky or the seasons or the precession of any kind of stars, etc., is completely self-contained. And within that system, the length of an hour is consistent no matter what. So that's a self-contained measurement. But then we have a relative or dependent system of measurement, and that would be, for example, measuring time based on sunlight. And that changes based on the seasons. And so based on the seasons, the length of hours changes. So that is a dependent system of measurement, or what we can call a real world or a natural system of measurement. And because time and direction, or time and space, is essentially the same thing, time and direction is interrelated, then it makes a big difference on the calculations of time and direction if you're using a self-contained system of measurement or a natural, or aka dependent system of measurement. It doesn't just affect the time, it can affect the direction as well. So what happened in the past? Because we want to say, okay, so essentially, if we're saying that like your watch is a self-contained system, but then sunlight would be a dependent system, then we'd have to ask, first thing is, well, what did the Jingunden samurai, the Tada Genji, what did they use? Now, we know in the past that there were some systems of a constant self-contained measurement used for time. Certain types of, for example, burning incense sticks that had a relatively consistent burn speed, so that, like, for example, this incense stick of this length made in this way burns this much every 15 minutes kind of thing, right? There were systems like that. But for the most part, many times, and this becomes more common the farther back in time you go, the time, the hours, varied in length because they were based on the relative time, or the dependent natural time system. So, for example, dependent on sunlight, dependent on season, etc. So that is, what I mean is, within that system of measurement, the length of hours changes based on the time of year. So, for example, the hour of the rat is longer in the winter, and the hour of the horse is longer in the summer. Consequently, the hour of the rat is shorter in summer, and the hour of the horse is shorter in winter. And this becomes a major issue, a key issue, when doing your Great Star calculations. So if you look at your screen, we have this picture, all right? And as you know, this picture comes, I have that picture, it's on page 185 and 186. On page 185 in the book, we have a picture from the Tada scroll, and then on page 186 you have this picture, in which I've redone the picture, and it has the English translation on there. So the green arrow is pointing to where on the Tada sun mirror, where the hour of the horse is, right? So that would, normally we say the hour of the horse is noon, but it's only noon when you're using the concept of self-contained time. When you're using real time or natural time or dependent time, the hour of the horse is longer in the summer and it's shorter in the winter, so it wouldn't corroborate perfectly with your watch. Does that make sense? Your watch keeps self-contained time that's independent. It's disconnected from the natural world. Whereas this, for example, the Tada sun mirror utilizes the natural world to determine the length and the position of the time. We have that same issue in red. We're pointing to the hour of the rat. So the hour of a rat is only really midnight if you're using a constant system of measurement, such as a wristwatch, right? But really, during winter, the hour of the rat is longer. And during the summer, the hour of the rat is shorter. And that's when you're using real time or natural time. I'm hoping this is making sense. If it's making sense, put it in the comments. If it's not, put it in the comments. But we're going to continue to move forward. I'm going to assume that you're understanding this distinction. So as I said in this Tada Genji sun mirror diagram, page 185 and 186 in the book, we see you can also tell, right? These hours are not paced out evenly. This isn't a perfect circle where each hour gets its own it's not like a clock where each hour gets its own perfect little slice that's equivalent to all the other slices, and the seconds tick away and the minutes tick away and everything is exactly even. It's nothing like that. And the reason is because the sun mirror has to take into account the actual movement of light, the actual play of light. And if you want to, you can Google ancient Japanese sundials, ancient Chinese sundials, whatever. You can look and you can see that the old sundials have this uneven placement because it's taking into account the actual movement of the light. So if this sun mirror, aka sundial, was equally spaced out like a clock, then the timing would be horribly inaccurate, horribly wrong. It would just be wrong, because the time that we keep self-contained is not the way that time in the natural world manifests or shows itself. All right, so it has to be spaced out in this way to account for the actual movement of sunlight. So consequently, this means that you cannot just simply assume that the position of the light, you cannot assume the position of the light based merely on the time of day or what your clock says. So this means that the time and direction has to be relative to where you are measuring. You cannot just look at your watch and say, oh, it's noon, it's the hour of the horse. It doesn't work that way. You have to measure the time. The light and the direction, and thus the time and the direction, must be measured relative to where you are standing at the time of taking the measurement. This is exactly the same situation we have with time zones and the issue of the sunlight over the horizon, which is why we have our longitude. It's that same reason. Time is relative based on where you are located. Thus, before you can begin to do these great star equations, you have to realize and accept that the time and the location are relative to the place that you're standing or sitting, whatever, and that these calculations have to be made relative to your place and time. You can't just look at your watch and say, like I said earlier, you can't just look at your watch and say, oh, it's noon, I'm at the hour of the horse. That must mean that such and such star must therefore be in such and such direction. Incorrect. You need to actually determine the correct hour, your natural time, based on the actual place and time where you are located. You need to know what time it is based on the actual angle of the sun, aka where the sunlight and the shadows tell you the time is. Direction also plays the same dance. You can't just say, well, this is roughly the northern direction. You need to actually align yourself based on the play of the sunlight and the place where you're actually standing. Also, just like you need to just throw away the concept of a watch for this, you need to throw away the concept of a compass. Okay, remember, don't just be like, well, my compass says this is north. Remember, there is such a thing as magnetic declination. And magnetic declination, that's the difference between magnetic north and true north. And that is all over the planet. And that difference is significant. In some places, it's 15, 20 degrees. So so magnetic north is not true north. So when you're doing these great star equations, throw away your watch, throw away your compass. You're not going to use them anyway. They have nothing to do with these calculations. So on your screen is another diagram from the book, and this is the standard typical arrangement. Now, this is how it is taught, and this is how it is sort of presented. But remember, each one of these directions is technically relative. It's taught in a very straightforward, equally spaced out way. But these directions correlate to the true directions. Okay, not the magnetic direction, but the true direction. So it's better to understand them as relative to your position. Don't think of them as compass readings. Now, obviously, they correlate to the real directions. But again, don't think of it as compass readings. Think of it as in relation to where the sunlight and the actual directions are telling you, where the natural world is telling you. Don't go with a compass. Like, for example, look at the red pointing to the north. Remember, on old Japanese diagrams, north is on the bottom. They write the maps reverse to what modern day maps are. North is not on the top. North is on the bottom. South is on the top. And consequently, east is to the left, not to the right, because it's turned that way. So, north, remember, that is not magnetic north. All right, this north, the direction of the rat, north, it is a direction based on place and time, your place and time, where the sunlight is showing. It does absolutely correlate to true north, but I really need to get it in your head that we are not using compasses or watches. We are using the natural world, and specifically we're using the sunlight to get these directions and get these times. Same for the south. Don't think that south is the opposite to magnetic north. South would be opposite to true north, or to the direction that the sun is telling you is north. So again, no compasses. And it is for this reason, or these reasons, one needs to be trained in the methods of determining directions based on the actual sunlight and shadows, as I discuss in the book, starting on page 185. And of course, we'll go into it more in future videos. This is also why, for example, a proper Genji tradition trained samurai should carry a war fan, and on the war fan, at least on one of the sides, there needs to be this directional chart. And you should also have it memorized. This way, when you know how to do these calculations, you can do these sun and shadow calculations, you can properly determine time, and then you can properly determine direction. And once you have the natural time and the natural direction, then you can use your directional chart printed on your fan to do your calculations for the different directions, etc., etc., etc. Again, these are based on natural time, natural direction, based on sunlight, based on true north, not based on a compass or a watch. Throw away the compass and watch when doing the great star calculations. Now, of course, a watch and a compass is great for keeping time and navigating, for soldiers on the ground. For non-great star military applications, of course, compasses and watches and self-contained, consistent, non-dependent time measurements are awesome. Okay, it's easier and more effective to use self-contained time for timing attacks and timing meetings, right? No argument here. There's even old shinobi methods for making compasses in the field and for keeping track of self-contained time using those incense sticks that I mentioned earlier. But that is shinobi operations. We're not that's for navigating and for setting up meetings and stuff. That's not what we're talking about now, though. We're not talking about timing raids and navigating forest at night. What we're talking about in this case is religious rites, those kind of level calculations, right? Some of these calculations are for military purposes, such as the direction the military should go, or the direction the military should not be facing, or things like that. But these aren't considered the same kind of movements such as small troop movements or shinobi moving. These are essentially religious level military calculations. So remember, for samurai, there are certain military behaviors. I'm trying to think of a good word. Certain military functions that are not seen as purely worldly functions, but they are seen as religious duties or religious functions. They're not seen as mundane behaviors. They're seen as religious behaviors or spiritual functions. They are the rites, like RITE, the rites of the military spiritual practices. And for those, you require the great star calculations.